Yeah, it's working. Hello, everybody, to the last session of the first day of May 2022. The next panel discussion is brought to you by the Unique Students Affairs Committee. And without further ado, we will start because we are short on time. As you may know, switching fields and transitioning from research to industry is making a big, or staying in academia is making a big fuss in the Neuro-AI community right now. And with students from different backgrounds, such as psychology, philosophy, and engineering, developing interest in Neuro-AI research and researchers looking for academia or industry jobs and opportunities, we decided to host this panel to tackle the general topic of career perspectives in Neuro-AI. And to provide different opinions about this topic, we have invited panelists from a range of different states in their academic career and with different backgrounds to discuss challenges, opportunities, and experiences of such transitions and career choices. Within this discussion, I encourage students and attendees to ask questions to the panelists, either in the Q&A box on Zoom or directly to the speakers for in-person attendees. But before we start with our questions, I'm thrilled to welcome our panelists on stage, and I will just take a few seconds to introduce them. As our first panelist, please welcome Flavie Lavoie-Cardinale. Flavie is an assistant professor in the Psychiatry and Neuroscience Department of the Faculty of Medicine at Université Laval. She is also a regular member of Unique and a researcher at the Brain Research Center, Cerveau. She holds master's and PhD in chemistry from University of Siegen. Her research focus is optical nanoscopy, machine learning and deep learning, neurophotonics, cellular and molecular neuroscience. Before joining Université de Laval, Flavie was a postdoc fellow at Max Planck Institute for Biophysical Chemistry, and she did also a postdoc research fellowship at Institut Universitaire en Santé Mentale de Québec. Welcome, Flavie, and thank you for joining us today. As a second panelist, we have Shahab Bakhtiari, who's also the chair of this session. Shahab is joining University of Montréal as an assistant professor at the Department of Psychology starting January 2023. He's also a member of Mila, Quebec AI Institute, and a regular member of Unique. He obtained his bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering from University of Tehran and completed a PhD in the integrated neuroscience program at McGill. His research is focused on visual perception and learning in artificial and biological neural networks. And until now, he was a postdoc researcher in Blake Richard's lab at Mila and McGill University. Thank you, Shahab, for joining us. Our third panelist today is Angela Tam. Angela is a senior scientist at Perceiv AI. She did her bachelor's studies in psychology at University of Ottawa and got a master's degree in neuroscience from Queen's University. She also holds a PhD in neuroscience from McGill University. Before joining Perceiv AI, she was a postdoctoral research fellow at the National University of Singapore. And through her journey, she became an expert in developing prognostic neuroimaging biomarkers for neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer. Welcome, Angela, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And lastly, I would like to welcome Julie Boyle, who is the project manager at Courtois Neuromod project in le Centre de Recherche de l'Institut Universitaire de Gériatrie de Montréal. She has over 15 years of experience in managing neuroimaging projects in both academia and industry. And she has collaborated with labs around the world. After working as a scientific consultant, she has recently joined the CMEX-P lab to explore her interest in using fMRI data to help train artificial neural networks. Welcome, Julie, and thank you for joining us today. Finally, my name is Hamza Abdelhadi, and I'm first-year master's students at Université Montréal, and I will be your moderator for this session. So to get started and to give the audience some time to prepare their questions, I will tackle the first topic of our panel today. This is a slightly straightforward question. From your perspective, if you are in academia, what are the top advantages, in your opinion, to working in it as compared to industry? And if you chose industry, what are the top advantages to working in it as compared to academia? To put it in general terms, why did you make this career path or career choice?
Well, I think I never thought about going to industry. I don't know why, but for me, I wanted to stay in academia, and now I enjoy it because I work with young people all the time. So I like to see students learning, and I think that's the thing I like the most about academia, just being always learning and seeing the younger one learning. So that's the reason.
Actually, I was kind of dissimilar to Flavia. I thought a lot about joining industry. I would say in this space of Neuro-AI, one important difference between industry and academia is the time that you can actually spend thinking about a single project. In academia, you will have probably more years to invest in a specific project to try to solve a specific question that you have in your mind. But in industry, at the end, the focus is on the financial outcome. So you have to add some profit to the whole picture that company has. So I thought that just comparing across different possibilities of academic position, industrial positions, you could imagine that being in academia for 10 years, it will let me think about deeper problems that are not economically necessarily profitable. But it doesn't mean that this is the right thing to do. So we can probably talk about that a bit. Yeah.
So I decided to join industry because I really wanted my research to be translatable to the real world. And I figured that the only way I could bring a product that could actually help people, like making a clinical decision support tool, for example, or tools to optimize clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies, that was only going to happen if I joined a company, and it wouldn't happen in an academic setting.
So having worked actually in both worlds, although I'm currently, I guess, in academia, maybe Neuromod's a little bit of a mix of both. I think there's benefits to both sides, and I think it really depends what you're looking for. I think there's benefits being in academia, definitely having more time to explore questions and not having to be on such crunch timelines definitely is a benefit. There's multiple benefits to being in industry too. I think if you're interested in exploring multiple questions and not necessarily having to dedicate many, many years of your life to answer one question, getting to travel a lot, that was a really nice thing for me. And definitely just building your network. I think in academia, we build network with other academics. So it's always interesting when you actually have the experience of going out to industry and to kind of expand your professional network. So, and obviously the money. That's the other reason.
Okay, thank you. These are some insightful ideas. Moving now to the second question, which is slightly related to the first. If you were to restart now, what are the mistakes, if you did any, that you would want to correct? And would you make the same career path choice?
I mean, I would. That's a very clear. I think I have the advantage of having of not having such a dedicated career path. I think Angela and I were talking about this last night, but I love to follow the science. Like that's the thing I fell in love with in graduate school. It's the thing I love the most. And wherever the science is interesting, that's what I want to be. So, and for now, it's at Neuromod where we get to do lots of fun stuff. And for a while, it was consulting. And who knows where the future is.
I think in general, for me at least, it was so spontaneous that I'm not sure it's reproducible. So if it was reproducible, I would definitely redo it. But for me, it started from electrical engineering, and how I ended up in neuroscience was total chance. But if I go back and everything happens in the same way, I hope to be able to reproduce this trajectory. But the problem is that I don't think that for every single person, this is something that can be reproduced. So I think that everyone should be able to find their own way by looking at the signs that Julie just mentioned.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think like I could even imagine when I was doing my PhD in like theoretical chemistry that I would do now neuroscience and machine learning. But by kind of following your interest and yeah, following science and like doors that open and always keeping an eye on like what is motivating and what you want to actually spend so much time, because as the other panelists said, like when you are in academia, you will spend a lot of time for many years on one questions. So it needs to be interesting. And even if you started in another field and you realize, well, maybe that's not exactly what I was expecting, it's possible to change and to turn. It won't be a really direct and like straight line. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
Add something. So for those who are here, I think there is an interest in Neuro-AI, right? If their path hasn't formed totally, the reason that they are here is probably because they're interested in Neuro-AI and they want to find their path within Neuro-AI. And I think for those people, the most important thing is to make sure that they kind of complement the knowledge that they currently have throughout their path. Because Neuro-AI is a field that is extremely interdisciplinary. And if their background is neuroscience or cognitive science or psychology, it is important to gain some experience, some firsthand experience in the AI world. And if their background is AI and engineering, it's very important to open up some brains and look directly at a brain at least once a week, because this is very important. This is, I think, the only thing that matters if they're trying to find their path through this space of Neuro-AI.
I think every other panelist had a lot of interesting things to say. I definitely agree with like a non-linear trajectory was kind of what happened for me. Like I never expected that in my bachelor's in psychology that I'd ever end up like coding every day of my life now, you know? So yeah, like in my PhD, I didn't even know how to code at all. Well, I learned at the end, but yeah, I think the only thing like for my particular job right now at this stage of my life, like one thing if I could go back in time, I would spend more time taking stats classes, for example, but you know, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. I think our dear panelists kind of predicted my next question and some of them answered it. So I will just keep with it. Why did you choose Neuro-AI? Like we have people from different backgrounds. I'm from telecommunication, from chemistry, from electrical engineering. And what are the main challenges you faced in switching? Like even if you did one of those two fields in undergrad, what are the main challenges to like grasp the other and manage to improve your skills in the other field?
So when I started joining this type of studies, it wasn't called Neuro-AI. It was neuroscience with some methodological approaches that were similar to AI. So I was studying vision. And in vision, one of the dreams of vision scientists was being able to have a model that performs in the same way that humans can perform in a task or in a natural environment. So ideally, you would want to basically feed this model with a natural image or with any type of image that a human subject would encounter in the real world. This wasn't possible before the deep learning era. This was, at least the models were not that well performing. After the deep learning, the new deep learning era, after 2012 and AlexNet, it was very obvious that these models have something that the existing models in vision neuroscience don't have it. So it was very natural. And after the work from several groups in this area, it was very natural that neuroscience couldn't ignore deep learning and AI anymore. So in order to understand how the brain works, we maybe need to take a look at how these models are doing these specific tasks and show these specific behaviors. And then a set of promising works came out, and it was very obvious at that point, at least for myself and some other people, that the combination of these two fields is important. The next thing that happened for me was, it was at the middle of my PhD, close to the end of my PhD. I got lucky that Blake moved to Montreal, and I basically joined his lab, and he was basically interested in these sort of things. One thing that I did for the last couple of years was to make sure that I can speak the language of AI scientists, because this is a key skill. If we're doing neuroscience and we're not able to understand Yoshua Bengio's talk, or any other person that works in this field, in AI field, if you're not able to understand some of these models, we can't talk to them. Therefore, we can't contribute back to the AI world. So this is the thing that I think is very important to be picked up early in our careers.
People that are in AI also have to learn to speak the language of neuroscientists, because we see this actually at Neuromod, where we're a bunch of computer scientists, neuroscientists, psychologists, and making sure that we can all speak the same language. And I don't know, I mean, I hear definitely neuroscientists need to learn, but I definitely think that the reverse must happen too. I don't know how many times a cognitive neuroscience or one of the coders in the lab comes with a brain map and says, what does this mean? Do you know? And it's because I come from a neuroscience background. I think it's important that we learn to speak each other's languages, or not knowing the type of data that we acquired or the TR off the scanner. These are types of things that we owe it to each other in order to push this field forward, to learn each other's languages. And even if you don't become an expert in neuroscience, or you don't become an expert in AI, definitely if you have to learn enough to be able to have the conversations that are going to push this field forward.
Yeah, I think also learning to ask questions and being comfortable, being uncomfortable, like being comfortable saying that you don't understand, and asking the others to explain it in another way, or try to learn the common vocabulary, is something that is essential when you want to mix fields, but also when you want to change field. And that's something I learned a lot by starting to mix AI and neuroscience, is that it was okay to ask and not to understand everything from a talk, and then to go back and learn. And that's something that we will have to do like our whole career, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever I was in academia or now in industry, like with my team at Perceiv, I think like my best learning experiences were always in it with other people, whether it was like code review or just through journal club or something like that. Like I definitely learned so much through my peers and colleagues.
I think the best moment to ask silly questions is happy hour. That's the best moment when you're having drinks. Ask the silly questions. Everything's fine. If you don't want to step up in front of the mic, just go ask them at happy hour, which we'll have in a bit, right?
I also want to encourage students, if they have questions, either online or directly.
Hi. I'm wondering what advice you have for yourself when you were starting your PhD.
Okay, drink more coffee early in the morning, so the day will be longer. But okay, I think being more diverse in learning materials that I absorbed would be something that I would definitely change. I was very focused on a specific subfield, and later on, maybe later PhD and early postdoc, I realized that it would be better to absorb more diverse skill sets, not necessarily limited to neuroscience and AI, but in general, philosophy, for example. That would be more fun, I would say, and more useful later on in your career. And one thing is, if other thing is that if your project doesn't work, don't freak out. It is very normal. Most of the time, things don't work. Yeah, these two things.
I would say actually don't be afraid to make your own path. I think that, we're often sold when we're in graduate school that there's the path of you go and you become an academic, which is a beautiful career. And if that's what you're interested in, then I'd highly suggest that. But there's a whole assortment of careers you can have out there. And those are the ones that we don't often talk about. I think the second thing coming up in the neuroscience world, it's definitely like you're with us or you're against us, like you're either part of academia or you're in industry. And that's a lesson we can learn from the AI field, where it really feels that now there's all these professors that have, they have their professorship and then they're in industry. And I find that's a really cool thing. And that's a lesson we can learn from the AI world.
I think I wish I looked more into careers in industry while I was a PhD student. So there are some interesting programs like through MyTax, for example, that like the industry partner will contribute part of the money or funding to the student. So yeah, they have some really cool projects actually. So, I think that's a really good option to look into if that's a direction you want to go in.
I think for me also it was diversity, and I switched field after the PhD in order to be able to do more different things and work in a multidisciplinary environment. But I wish I had done that already at a PhD level, even if you have the impression that you're slower because it's something new and you have to learn it. I don't think necessarily it's getting slower. It's just being opening your mind and maybe thinking outside the box. And now when I look at the projects I'm working on, the most exciting projects for me are the ones that are extremely diverse. And I see also students trusting themselves to take some classes that are totally outside of their comfort zone, and at the end having fun. And one example is a student, and he's here, and he knows I will tell the story, but he's in biophotonics, and he decided to take a cosmology class at the University of Toronto. So of course, in biophotonics, that was the first time that a student was asked to take cosmology. But I think that brought something very different into our project. And what he learned there, it's something totally unique that will be important for the PhD, even if it was a bit exotic, but yeah.
Okay. So you earlier, both of you mentioned the need for a neuroscience student to understand the language of AI and vice versa. What tips would you give to someone like me who is trying to understand neuroscience? Because when you say learn the language, I could go on reading, it's really deep and there's lots of new things happening, and we're students, we have courseworks and things to keep up with. So how would you encourage someone to go about entering a field like neuroscience?
Maybe try to have a team project, for example, with a student that has a complementary background, and where you can really work together, go together at the microscope or do some recordings together and really ask questions and try to do this project, not everyone doing the part he or she is expert in, but really trying to do it together. And then you will see that you will learn just by osmosis, you will learn a lot of new vocabulary, and you will not even realize that you're learning all this stuff. And I think that's a good start. And at the same time, you will do a project, so you will advance within your PhD.
Thank you very much.
I have maybe a bit of a vague question, but hopefully it'll be interesting. So I think a lot of people have the perception that, especially in neuroscience research, if you choose to walk out of the room, it's a one-way ticket. And I think there's a lot of interesting research and projects going on in industry. My first experience in experimental neuroscience was 10 years ago, and it's a deep part of who I am. And the thought of ever not being in the lab terrifies me. Do you know anyone that's actually switched to industry that has a deep remorse about doing that, or have most of the experiences been positive?
Positive.
No, I think there's both sides.
I'm joking. Yes. Actually, I don't know any person. So if you truly know anyone that
I don't know people that have had deep remorse. I think that's I don't know, that's a deep question in itself. I think it really depends on the field, and I think it depends on each person. Like everyone has a spot and a place that you can contribute to science, and whether it's in industry or whether it's in academia, you just got to find the right spot, and you don't have to get it right the first time. I definitely don't know anybody that has any deep regrets. It's true that in industry, you're much what you study, you're much more yoked. And I can remember, you know, I consulted for many years, and at the end, I mean, Pierre and I have been friends for years. Like I was like, they pay you to do what you're already an expert on. So the capacity to learn sometimes is not as fast as we can do in academia. So maybe at some point I don't know about deep remorse, but I was just like looking for other things, maybe a new challenge.
I don't know. For me, I've learned a lot the past 2 years that I've been with Perceiv. So this is my first industry job, and I'm really looking forward to, you know, my next career move in probably industry again. So I can like learn more from like a different field, a slightly different field, or, you know, and I think, okay, so if you really want to be a scientist and like be in a lab, like you can do that. Like my day-to-day right now isn't that much different from when I was a postdoc or a PhD student. Like I'm a lot more efficient at my job now, you know, with years of experience and everything. But like I still run experiments. I'm still, you know, processing data, doing a lot of data cleaning. I still go to conferences. I was just in San Francisco for a conference about clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease where I was presenting, you know. So if you really want to do all those things, but you want your work to be applicable in the real world, you know, I would suggest thinking about an industry at least.
And I think sometimes in industry, like you don't have the administrative burden that you have in academia as PIs. You guys,
someone else has that job.
Yes, has that job. Someone else is managing the money. Someone else is you. So there is an advantage there where you just get to do the thing that you love to do under these constraints, of course.
just to add something, I totally agree with what you all said. So one thing is that most of the cases that I have talked to, most of people who actually transitioned from academia to industry, I talked to them right after they did the transition. So maybe 1 month, 2 months later, and they were so happy because the only thing that they remembered was the negative aspects of academia, things that they were fighting with for a very long time. They couldn't defeat it, so they decided to move, either after a postdoc, after a PhD, or even faculty members. What I'm imagining is that as time goes on, after maybe a few years, they start remembering the positive sides of academia. So that is the time that I have to go back to them and say that, okay, how do you feel now? I'm imagining that there are two sides to it. And as you know, this is, yeah.
The grass is not greener on one side of the fence or the other. I think it's
Okay, the one thing I really miss about academia though is the library subscription, because like if it's not open access, like I can't really do my job that great. So yeah.
Thank you. Sorry for being a little dramatic.
For the people who worked in industry, what were the culture shocks that you experienced moving from academia to industry?
The pace is a lot faster. I work at a startup and I was the first non-founder employee. So we're a really small team, and we just closed our first round of fundraising. So it's been like a whirlwind, and everything just develops so fast.
I would say the rigidity of deadlines. Deadlines are not anything that's negotiable in industry. Like there's a deadline and you're going to meet that deadline. Otherwise, there's definitely in consulting, there's financial loss if you don't meet that deadline. So
can I ask a question from you two? Do you think deadlines are good? So should we have deadlines are good, like rigorous deadlines? So should we have, so you're implementing them in Neuromod, right? Pierre is
looking at me. Yeah, I think deadlines are great. Yeah.
Okay. So you basically you think that in academia also we should have more rigid deadlines that
I think it depends on the topic you're tackling. I think there's some things that can have very rigorous deadlines, and you can encourage a team to meet them. I mean, that's and there's some things that are exploration, and those things need the time that they take. Like, I think that's the difference of what we get to do in academia, is explore questions that take more time, you know? And so I think a balance of both is ideal. And definitely, like at Neuromod, Pierre and I talk about this often, we kind of function like a bit of a startup. Like, there's always a sense of urgency to deliver certain things, that it's important to hit milestones and push constantly. But then there's some facets of the project that just take the time they take too.
I mean, I think deadlines in, like, at least the company I'm working at versus academia, they're for different reasons, you know. Like for me, I have deadlines because it's tied to like a contract with a client, you know. So yeah, the, you know, consequences of missing a deadline are very, very different, right? It could be like hundreds of thousands of dollars gone if I don't make it, right?
Just to follow up, for the people who stayed in academia, what were the culture shocks from postdoc to the academic job?
Oh, I would say the pressure. Like, now it's on you to get the funding for your group. If you hire students, you need to be able to fund them and to plan ahead. And yeah, so I thought I had a lot to do as a postdoc, and then I realized that it was even more as a PI. But I must say, it's also the difficulty of many young PIs is that it's at the same time that you get kids. So like, you have your group and you have to manage your group, and you have young kids. And we were talking about that yesterday evening with other young PIs. And this is really a challenge, to be able to do everything. And you have the pressure that if you don't succeed, it's not only you, it's also like your group and the students you're supervising.
Well, I haven't started yet, so I think so. But I'm gradually moving toward being a PI for the last couple of months. Sorry, Blake, I was still doing the project, but yeah. But through this transition, I noticed that suddenly the number of emails gradually increase, and thinking becomes more long-termish, because you have to think in the scale of grants, like 5 years or more. And there is also some money that you need to manage. In postdocs, you don't need to manage money because you don't get many, right? So you don't need to manage it. But as the government starts paying you for educating students and doing some research, you have to think about what you want to do with this money. And that is a shock. That's a very big shock. And I would think that the best thing to do for a postdoc would be to actually get a taste of it during their postdoc, if they are at least 50% sure that they want to stay in academia. Yes, I think Blake was too kind to send me grants to basically write up, but yeah, I think you need to get that mindset a bit in order to avoid that shock, I guess, to some extent.
So one thing I want to add about the culture shock to industry. So part of the reason why the pace is much faster, at least in my case, is that when you're in a company, everyone's working towards the same mission. So you're never stuck on a problem. Like, everyone has to help each other out to move something forward. So I just found that in academia, in comparison, each person's more incentivized to work on their own thing. And it's, you know, you're a lot more isolated, I think. So even though I'm doing a lot of the similar stuff that I was doing in my PhD, I'm able to move a lot faster because I have teammates who can help me out.
Hi, my name is Nicole Sande, and I'm very interested in this conversation about industry and academia. And so what I was wondering, I heard it kind of mentioned in the panel that the thing about industry is that you do work that is more translatable to the real world. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of have that internal battle in terms of should I stay in academia or should I do industry? So I was wondering what you think we can do to make academia projects and research more translatable to the real world. I've been noticing that there's been more collaborations between industry and academia, and I was wondering if you guys can speak on that.
I think it depends also on the fields you're in. For example, I have many colleagues in clinical neuroscience that work every day with patients, and like their work more or less directly translate to the public. And so I guess there is possibility to be in academia and to do some work that is very translatable. I'm doing very like fundamental basic science, so I do not, but that's more of a choice. Like that was always the type of science I was doing, but I think it's possible if that's something you want to do, and like being able to translate to the public is not something that is exclusive to industry. You can have a lot of different fields in academia that will allow to do that.
I would try to look for postdocs or PhD positions that are partially funded by industry. So you'll have these collaborations between academic labs and industry partners. Like, for example, a pharmaceutical company might fund PhD students' work on like a biomarker or something like that.
In Canada, MyTax is a great resource. Basically, it funds positions that are joint between labs and a company. So because the position is joint, both sides have to agree on a project. And that is basically what forces the two partners to make sure that it is something that can be used in real world and also has some scientific value to it. But also on the other hand, I think that it is important for academics to deliberately have the mindset of educating students that can easily transition to industry. And that is something that PIs basically who have grad students in their labs, I think have to do deliberately, making sure that they learn skills that can be used outside academia. And this is more important for labs that do only experimental work, because it is very easy, I did it to some extent, it is very easy to imagine that you end up working the whole day on the bench, just, you know, recording from neurons all day. It's I know it's very difficult job, difficult thing to do in a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, it has to be that students learn stuff that are not only useful inside a lab that does basic science. So it needs efforts from different sides, I would say.
We'll finish with our two last questions, the first online and you will be the last.
Okay, I hope I'm reading their name right. Cornelius CRIUGM asking, when learning the language of neuroscience or AI, what resources like textbook, online lecture, etc. can you recommend?
Well, I think NeuroMatch is something that should be mentioned in these situations. NeuroMatch, all the effort that they have been putting together for the last, I think 2-3 years, has generated a big resource for both neuroscience, computational neuroscience, and AI. Depending on the direction of transition, they might need some extra resources, but I think NeuroMatch is something that everyone should go to as the first resource at this moment. Unfortunately, in computational neuroscience, at least, other than Diane and Abbott's classic book, I don't know of any other existing book that can be used for computational neuroscience. Hopefully someone is writing it up now. But yeah, and
just to go to main educational, that's a great place to make friends from both sides, to learn. I think definitely some of the methods, but that's what I would suggest.
I also asked, as a postdoc at the beginning of my postdoc, I just asked the professors that were giving some AI classes if I could just sit in the class and listen. And I did that for 2 different AI classes, and that helped a lot. Not during the exam, but just sitting there and listening to the class during the exercise. That was good.
Yeah, so my question is, for neuroscience, like as we discussed, we need a diverse team. We need statisticians, we need like neuroscientists, we need AI scientists. And I feel like it's easier to get such a diverse set in academia because like we all are affiliated to an institute. So like we can find people with different areas of expertise and have a lab. But then is the same possible easily in an industry? Like I understand it might be possible in a startup when you can like come together with such people, but like in a company that already has an established research, like maybe Google research or Meta AI, is it easy for them to transition into neuroscience given that it is such it's a field that requires such diverse set of inputs?
So I think, so let me first make sure that I understand the question correctly. So you're saying making the transition within a big company, or so so you're imagining that you are a neuroscience graduate and you're going to Big Brain, for example, at Google, and you want to transition to AI. That would be difficult. I haven't worked at Big Brain, so disclosure. But I imagine that just by knowing the mindset of people who work in these environments, they have a very rigid AI mindset, which means that they think within the framework of AI. They think about, they think in terms of deep learning, in terms of architectures, how to train the model, how to basically set the learning schedule, for example, for for large scale model. Right. So these are for neuroscience students, these are very strange terms and strange, I would say, way of thinking. So this is why I think if this transition wants to happen during the degree, during the time that someone is doing their PhD, they need to shift the way that they think a bit toward this, if this is the transition that they want to do. But I'm saying this because in a place like Google, at the end, they're after an AI product, right? They're not doing Neuro-AI research in the sense that we are talking about it here, at least not now. It is possible that we do things that are so attractive to them that suddenly they just change everything, they start doing these sort of things. But for now, for this moment, we need to learn their language. Neuroscientists need to learn their language and speak in that language. And I think it's a good language too. So.
Thank you.
So I wanted to make a quick comment, or maybe it's probably going to be bad advice, but I was thinking, listening to the discussion, I have the impression that sometimes the question that we need to ask ourselves, so that's, or the younger people need to ask themselves, is not, am I cut out to be in academia or in industry per se, but it's more thinking about finding out what you're passionate about. Because I think that's the element that sometimes we forget. It's, am I passionate about science per se? Is that what drives me? And then in that case, probably I can do good science both places. Or am I passionate about solving problems? And does that mean creating solutions and actually products? Then maybe there are more chances of that happening in industry. Or am I, more challenged by just intellectual questions? Or am I excited about mentoring? I think this is what you meant also, Flavie. For you, it was really important to have this connection and have the feeling that you're contributing to mentoring and create, and So I think that's the key question. Even though it might sound very cheesy, I think, what am I passionate about? Because at the end of the day, if it's going to be your career, basically that's your job every day. So you better not be stuck doing something boring just because you thought, well, it's good to, I mean, for some people, maybe making money is going to be one objective, and that's perfectly okay. But I think in this time, it's a good period during your graduate studies to figure out, if you don't know yet, maybe you already know it, but if you don't, I think figuring out really what you're really passionate about and you enjoy doing, because I think that's key. That was just one quick comment. And if I can, very briefly, to the comment before about, I think Shahab mentioned this, being able to speak the language And you said we need to learn and maybe understand Yoshua Benji's talk. I don't want people to have the impression that if you can't follow such talks, then that's not going to be good enough for you to be Neuro-AI. I think there are different levels of how you can be involved in Neuro-AI. You can come in with a strong neuroscience background, and I think add a lot of data science and machine learning to it so that you can actually address your questions that you're most interested in. And the other way around, you can come from an AI background, and you don't need to have, and it might be probably difficult to have a lot of expertise in neuroscience, but sufficiently that you can converse with neuroscientists and address those questions. And for some people, maybe the joy is going to be being perfectly bilingual. And there are some examples of that. It's astonishing, but it is possible. But I mean, just to say there are those three options. So it doesn't have to be, perfectly bilingual. So.
I think, Karim, not just what you're passionate about, but what type of environment you thrive in. I think, unfortunately, when you're in academia, you don't really get exposed to industry that much, but different people thrive in different environments. And some people work better, when things are constantly changing and it's high pressure. And I mean, academia is also high pressure, and other people need that mental space to be able to discover things, and then do it at a different pace. And definitely UPIs are definitely very stressed, but it's a different pace. So it's I think figure out what environment you strive in, and just don't feel like just because you picked one environment doesn't mean you can't go between them.
This was a fruitful discussion, but unfortunately I will have to end it because we have reached our time. I would like again to thank our panelists for their insights and for their engaging discussion. However, before ending and moving to the closing remarks, I want to make a small announcement. The Unique Students Affairs Committee is hosting the next USS Unique Student Symposium in May or June 2023, and recruitment for the volunteers is open. We are also launching a monthly newsletter that will publish in it Quebec Neuro-AI and World Neuro-AI news. So if you want to join our mailing list to receive more of about our activities and the monthly newsletter, please check the Unique Twitter. And thank you for attending.